Hello, everyone, and welcome to Demos for Democracy, a series of ongoing live interactive online demos featuring designers and builders of the latest innovative governance platforms, tools, or methods to foster greater openness and collaboration to how we govern. We're very happy today because we have we have Joel, who is a co-creator of Ontodia, and he's gonna explain to us how the surface they created is going to help bring open data into the service of everyone. So thank you, Joel, for accepting our invitation. We're very happy to have you, and I don't want to steal more time from you. So welcome, and please tell us what Ontodia is and why did you decide to create this surface?
Right. Well, thank you once again for inviting me to present here at the Demos for Democracy. Ontodia is actually, give some context about how we started. About 3 years ago, I came to know about open data, and I've always thought that, and at the same time people were talking about big data. But I always thought open data is the kind of data that has the biggest impact, right? Because it's data about us, data for us, and the data that we paid for, right? And if used properly, it can have such big meaningful impact to what we're trying to do. We're talking about government 2.0, government as a platform, and all that good stuff, right? And that's a lot of the work that GovLabs does is along those lines. But what we found is doing open data at this stage is sometimes I'd like to compare it to where we were when content management systems first came around, right? At the time, for you to put up a website, back then you needed to know HTML, and you had to hand build it. And then a whole slew of tools came around called content management systems, and they were very expensive to deploy and maintain. Actually, I was involved in such a rollout about 10 years ago. We were doing Sony's website, and it was so expensive to maintain that website because we had to use this proprietary tool that was costing 6 figures a year to use that tool. But nowadays, with tools like Drupal, like Joomla, and WordPress, anybody can publish a website. And even now, that has even been improved upon by services like Squarespace. And these other services where even if you have just a modicum of knowledge about HTML, sometimes you don't even need to know anything about web design. You can publish a website, right, without having to worry about caching, without having to worry about backups and all that stuff. And that's one thing that we wanted to do when we created Open Data City, because we wanted to make open data available for all, meaning not just the big cities, the mega cities that have the luxury of a big IT department, or like here in New York, the Mayor's Office of Data Analytics, right? If you go to a typical town or city, there are about 35,000 municipalities in the US. Sometimes when we talk to our users, when we did our focus groups, we would find the police sergeant is also the webmaster of the town website, right? And sometimes there will be only volunteers who will be doing things for the town. And you can see if you go to town websites that it's really a volunteer effort, right? Yeah. And we were thinking, how can these small towns and municipalities and jurisdictions participate in the open data revolution? So that's what we had in mind when we designed Open Data City. So that's why when we use a tagline, open data for all, it's kind of a shameless rip-off of Squarespace logo, websites for all, right? So we wanted to commoditize open data publishing. Right now, it's really, even with the existing data portals, we don't really have context, right? It's basically a glorified FTP server. Yeah. And oftentimes, those data portals are also one way, just publishing, the government's publishing data. So we wanted to change that dynamic too, and be able to solicit data from citizens, from NGOs, from trusted organizations within the jurisdiction. One thing that also informed our product design was we've been involved in the open data space for about 3 years now since we won Big Apps, is we found that when we started hosting CCAN sites for various organizations and jurisdictions here in the US, there was a struggle about, okay, what do we do now? We have a data portal. What kind of data do we publish? And then that's another conversation, another effort, big effort by itself to curate the data and publish the data. So we said, what we need to do if we want to really make open data available for all, we need to give these data publishers a helping hand, right? Don't just give them a place to deposit files. They can do that with FTP servers or Dropbox or whatnot, right? Let's do some other things. And what we decided to do is for each jurisdiction, we went ahead and pre-slice some data that we thought everybody would find useful. High-value data sets like the US Census, the FBI crime data, and some other data sets at the state, federal, and even private data sets. Like, job listings from Indeed, postings from Craigslist, and maybe even to just give evergreen content to a certain site. We even just fetch pictures from Flickr. Say if there's Flickr pictures are geotagged and marked safe for children, we even just show it in the location. And talking about location, we're also big on context. So people don't really care about data sets. They care about small data, right? What can you tell me about this place? So we geotemporally curated and sliced the data on jurisdictions and boundaries people care about. Neighborhoods, zip codes, boroughs, counties, cities, right? Because if I look at the data set, say from a typical city, and they classify crime by precinct, nobody knows their police precinct, right? They know their neighborhood, they know their zip code. So what we do is when we do find data sets that we believe will be valuable to a jurisdiction, is we go ahead and pre-wrangle it so it's already there. So they don't need to think about, okay, I need to put in the data. So they can focus on curating the data sets that they produce, right?
And how do you decide which are the data sets that have value? Or how does this process work?
Right. So right now, we pretty much went ahead and seeded the corpus with data sets that we know are without even, we've done some of our interviews with our prospective customers. The U.S. Census, the FBI, the Department of Labor Statistics, because we needed that information too to go to the next part of what we're trying to do on how to make the data more actionable. So we said there's another thing that we need to do apart from slicing data geotemporally. We need to create indicators that people can use to track what the data says, right? So you can see trends over time. And what are the indicators we followed? About last summer, the International Standards Organization came out with a standard, ISO 37120. It's about 40 odd indicators about quality of life in cities, right? And we said, okay, we're not experts. So there are these experts who've been debated this for all these years, and finally, as luck would have it, came around the time we were designing the platform. Mm-hmm. And we adopted a lot of those indicators. And on top of that, we also created our own that we thought would be complementary to those indicators, because it's a great start. I'm not saying that the indicators are useless, but right now the context is at a very high level, cities and states and counties. And if I come out with an indicator about a city, about, say, one that we all know is unemployment rate, right? Mm-hmm. If I say it's on a city level or a national level or even a state level, the context is not as relevant to me. But what if I say the unemployment for this neighborhood is this? or the crime rate for this neighborhood is this, that becomes more relevant.
Yeah.
And when we compute those indicators, what we also do is we link to the data. Because one thing that we also found is when we were participating in all these hackathons and open data challenges, is we would see all these nice infographics, this nice insights, and even with all the data-driven journalism, you see a map, but there's no way for me to find out the provenance of the data in the map or that infographic, right? So what we wanted to do is if somebody builds an interpretation of that data set, we wanted to keep the link to the data, to how that indicator was computed.
Okay.
So together, that's what we built with Open Data City and Pediacities. And we decided to do it instead of building everything from scratch. Being a small startup, we said we just don't have the ability to build this. So we said, let's stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So much like we stood on the shoulders of the ISO to create the seed indicators, we identified CCAN as the open data platform of choice. It makes sense, publish open data with open source using open standards.
Yeah.
And we also found other projects, open source projects, and other efforts that were trying to compute indicators already, like the Neighborhood Indicators Project, and some other things that looking around that people were doing. So we took the best practices and just made it a service that we really price so it's really affordable. Because one other thing that we found when we were solicited, because we became CCAN's professional service partner last year, a lot of cities were contacting us, right? And even some federal agencies were contacting us, inviting us to help them build open data portals. But what we found was, as a small startup, the procurement process was just so hard that a small startup like ours had no chance to really compete with a big, provide government contractors, the CGIs, the IBMs, to offer that service. Even though we're telling them, you're a small startup, how do we know that you'll be around next year to run this portal? We tell them we didn't build it from scratch. We built it on open source, so you can have the confidence that this platform was actually built by hundreds of contributors around the world. So, it's not going to be something that will die even if we go away. Okay.
And why do you define Ontodia as a surface? And can you show how the surface looks like?
Yeah, sure. Let me do a demo.
Yes.
Okay. So Open Data City, taking the Squarespace inspiration, if you look at how we offer the service, it's very affordable for cities, so we don't cross the RFP threshold. And the way we built it was we used CCAN, but not just regular CCAN. One thing about CCAN is it's really a vast ecosystem. Right now, it has several hundred extensions, ranging from helping you to log in using LDAP to something that allows you to create a dashboard. It's so many extensions. And the comparison I'd like to do is, remember when Linux first came around, right? When Linux first came around, for you to actually use Linux, you had to be a kernel hacker. You had to compile your own sources. You need to download it from different repositories, from different version control systems, and then compile it on your own. And there came about, a short time after Linux came out, it was also democratized, right? There came companies like Red Hat, Ubuntu, that allowed you to use Linux without being a kernel hacker. And that's what we want to do with CCAN. Right now, CCAN is a bit hard to provision and also maintain on an ongoing basis, and also to take advantage of all these extensions being developed by the CCAN community. So we're creating Open Data City. I'd like to think of it as a hosted CCAN distribution that's curated for cities. Right? So it's, you don't need to know all these extensions and need to know how to maintain them.
Okay.
So right now, if you go to Open Data City, it's your regular CCAN, right? But we extended it so it's something that's more useful out of the box.
Okay.
So as you can see, we already pre-populated it with several hundred data sets. And these are data sets coming from different jurisdictions. And how did we choose this data sets? One thing we found is, let me go to our indicator platform, is we decided, okay, if we want to do this for all of the cities, we want it to be truly open data for all. There are about 35,000 towns, cities, and jurisdictions in the US, and about 7,000 counties, right? And 50 states. So what we said is, okay, let's look at the indicators that we found in the ISO standard and find out what we need to compute these indicators, right? So the indicators drove the data that we onboarded ahead of time, right? For us to compute population density, we need that data from the census, right? So we can compute per capita type calculations. So that's what informed the 488 plus data sets that we onboarded to Open Data City. And the thinking now is, actually, we just signed up a major Northeast city just last month, and we're going to announce it at the end of the month. Is the good thing about the feedback we got from them is, the great thing is, hey, when I fired up my portal, I have all these data sets pre-calculated for me already. I have these jurisdictions, I have the per capita information already in there for me. But now I can just put in, say, if I put my 311 data, you can start calculating things without me having to do that. Because one other thing that we created, Dinora, when we built this, is we found that for us to compute these indicators, we needed to do a lot of the data wrangling on our end, right?
Okay.
And we developed a lot of tools to do that. So those tools we're also exposing and making available to our clients. So it becomes also a data wrangling service. So what are these services? One thing is, for us to compute, if I go drill down to a certain jurisdiction. So here in Orange County, I know the population, and all these other things are cities. So if I click on a certain random city, let me, one of the bigger ones. Say we managed to sign up Woodbury, New York, right? We now know all these things about them. So if I go to population density, oops, sorry about that. Say percent living in poverty. If I click on this link, we'll show you how we computed that indicator, which we just referred to the ISO standard, right? And then if do you want to get the source, we tell you the link, right?
So, for example, I can determine what do I want to show. In here you say like Woodbury, New York, rank New York. Can I determine the content of those boxes, what's important to me, or can you run me a scenario where I am a city official and what's the user interface that I have to use and what are the possibilities that I have with you?
Right. So right now we actually haven't really activated it yet.
Okay.
because we're still curating the indicators.
Okay.
Ultimately, what we want to do is for that jurisdiction to create their own indicators.
Yes.
So indicators they care about. Say Woodbury, New York. If I'm not mistaken, that's the town where they have the outlet malls, right?
Yeah.
And say for some reason the mayor is very interested in tracking economic activity in that jurisdiction, in a certain zip code. So maybe if he has the data from tax receipts, from sales tax receipts, from those outlet malls retailers, right? If he uploads the data, he can compute his own indicator.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with that is, the indicator is will be standards based because we know the other parts of the equation already, like the population, like the jurisdiction, the boundary, the shapefile. And then he can just say if that indicator requires me to put in sales tax receipts, then and we can do that, right? But right, to be honest, that's still work in progress. We haven't really exposed it yet. That's why we're just using indicators that we curated ourselves.
Oh, so
And the reason why we soft launched the service, even though it's still early days, is we want to have that conversation
okay.
with those jurisdictions, because like similar to the city that we just sign up with us, is they wanted to track things like vacant lot, vacant properties. And with that conversation, we can we're using them to seed creating that vacant lot indicator, because we want to use that indicator in other jurisdictions as well.
Okay. So, for example, the big picture it is that you get to a point where the surface, I can input all these new data sets, and then the surface will tell me, with all these data sets, with this information, this is what you can show. These are the statistics. These are the conclusions or the indicators that you can show, and this is the way you can show them, either with a map or with a graph or with. Is that the
Yes, that's the intent. Is we want to have them embedded on their websites. We intend to make this something that they can. We want to use human nature too. Like, hey, why is New Rochelle, New York, 66,000? Why is that indicator up there? Then we can, we can start comparing jurisdictions, right?
Yeah.
So say Woodbury, New York, with say the New York City, and then like Albany,
Yeah.
and you can then start comparing places and see what are they doing. Why is this dependency ratio this? Why is the unemployment ratio this one? What is the Gini index this? The Gini index is one of those indicators that we decided to stand up ourselves. Gini index is an indicator of income inequality.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, okay, how do we measure that, right? And ultimately, this library of indicators will grow over time. One other thing that I want to highlight, because we've been focusing on the indicator platform, and if we go back to the CCAN curated CCAN offering that we have, is we also found out that a lot of cities, a lot of small jurisdictions needed help in doing some basic data science,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And when I say data science, I'm not saying the hardcore that you need a PhD data science. This is stuff like geocoding, right? Uh, just stuff like, oh, I want to create a map and I want to embed this map in my town website, right?
Yeah.
So just to show you something that we built.
How long does it take you to first contact a city and then display, like for example, what you did for what you're showing us?
Yes. So ultimately, what we want to do is similar to the way, I mean, it's still early days. Our aspiration is to be the GitHub of CCAN,
Okay.
right? So people just go in, and since we compute the indicators and say, hey, what, that indicator is wrong. Because one thing we also found was when we were computing indicators and we talked to some small town mayors, they were disputing the indicators.
Mm.
Because they said, oh, how did you compute that indicator? We said, oh, that data came from the census. But even the census, they were disputing,
Yeah.
right? Because especially for small towns, they were saying, according to the latest census, I lost 10,000 residents. But if I look at my public school enrollment, if I look at my solid waste output, I know those increased over the past 10 years. So how can they say that I lost 10,000 residents?
Yeah.
So we wanted to give them the chance to, like, okay, here's a computation. Maybe if you if you dispute that computation, if you expose your data and it's from transaction systems rather than from a survey, right? Then you can say, hey, according to the census, this is the indicator. According to the transaction system, this is the revised indicator. So we want to have that ability, because we know um, that a lot of these jurisdictions are disputing some. I mean, it's natural they will dispute the indicators we compute.
Okay.
Right.
And if you could say, like, what's your definition of success?
Right. So my definition of success will be when small towns, one stoplight towns, will start signing up themselves and onboarding data without us doing anything. And with the services we offer in terms of data wrangling, of automatic geocoding, of giving the ability for them to do simple dashboards like this without having to be a programmer, without having to be a data scientist. Um, that's one. Then I know if that happens, that I don't need to, um, like, conduct a long RFP process that takes 1 year to do, and then I have to compete with the big government guys, and people and small towns just self-enroll. I think then we made it. If
Okay.
that starts happening, right now it's not there yet.
Arno is asking, do you provide some template schemas for open data coming from cities? For nationwide data sets, is it easy to compare numbers? But how to do it across cities? For example, 311 response time.
Right. So that's something that we can do. So under the hood, we have a generic way to calculate uh, indicators based geotemporal indicators based on location and time. So if we have the boundary for a certain jurisdiction that describes that city or town, and yeah, we can compare across jurisdictions. Is a short answer. Um, and I was actually talking about the tool that we are exposing to enable that.
Mm-hmm.
When you upload data sets into your portal, into your jurisdiction, say you have your own definition of neighborhoods, right? You're not using the Silo definition of neighborhoods or the Google definition of neighborhoods. You have your own definition of neighborhoods, and you upload it to your portal. What we do is automatically we we enable you to geocode the following data sets that you upload. So say you have from a spreadsheet that the town maintains, or say the town subscribes to a service like public stuff, right? And they have 311 calls there, complaints. When they get the data, when they upload that data into our hosted CCAN, we also optionally geocode according to those boundaries. So what does that mean? So say I uploaded, like here in Newark, they uploaded their definition of neighborhoods, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they uploaded their 311 data, right, we automatically can aggregate by those jurisdictions without them having to know how to do geocoding. and not having to use the generic geocoding available from Google, because Google's definition of neighborhoods is vastly different from their definition of neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And with that, since we know, okay, this is iron bound, when we aggregate the complaints, I can say this is the number of complaints in this neighborhood, 1779. And if there's a calculation, okay, maybe the population of that iron bound neighborhood is 20,000 people, then we can start computing some indicators.
Cool. And is your project also open source? Can people volunteer and help you develop these?
Right. So right now, we have stood on the shoulders of giants. CCAN, there's a vast ecosystem of developers.
Okay.
We are contributing some extensions soon. We haven't released it yet. Right now, we are giving back already by contributing patches to CCAN. We're quite active. But we're currently developing 2 extensions for the geocoding, automatic geocoding based on the uploaded data sets. And we also develop a more robust mapping visualization system that uses another open source project called CartoDB. We're also developing that, and we will contribute that and make it available to the community.
Okay. And we're running out of time, but before we finish, can you please, if you had any wishes that could come true, which 3 wishes will you ask for Ontodia?
I would love to wish that right now, if we, it's a big wish. The way the RFP system is broken, right? And hopefully this system is adopted by enough jurisdictions so that it becomes more organic without having us to go to the traditional RFP procurement process, which is very onerous. Another wish would be, once we release those extensions, we hope that a lot of people will help us evolve those extensions and make it more robust. There's another project that's was just started by the U.S. Open Data Institute last month, the CCAN Multisite project. You may want to look that up. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make open data publishing easier still. And we're very excited about that project. And my wish is that that project is finished in short order, because if that project is done, I think we will come to the point when we will be given the ability to really be that Squarespace of open data, right? Anybody can publish open data, not just cities. Maybe even regular people can have their own data portals.
Okay. And any more or something that you would like to add before we finish the demo?
Well, that's all, and look forward to feedback. If you have a small town or jurisdiction that wants to try it out, right now we're only available in the US, and we're trying it out here in the Northeast. But if you want to try it out, just let us know and we'll spin up an instance for you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Joel. Thank you again for accepting this invitation. This certainly has been very useful, and it's great for us to hear about these new developments that will for sure make a difference. So we'll keep in touch, and we'll keep the conversation going through our website, and we'll also keep the emails back and forth.
Great. Thank you, Dinora.
Thank you, Joel. Bye-bye.